So I think one way to think about how do you gather information to create a story and where do you start? News starts with an idea. So perhaps you have an idea that the world is getting hotter or the weather is getting worse. What does that mean for my community? So at the University of Maryland, where I teach, we have several centers of journalism. And a couple of years ago, the college worked with National Public Radio, NPR, on a story about the rising heat and what that meant for a city like Baltimore. And my favorite story in that series was a story about the role of trees in managing heat in cities. And typically in cities in the United States, there are more trees in wealthier communities. And they're trees that can shade the area around them. They can shade the streets, they can shade the houses. The idea was to try to measure what effect trees had on the heat islands in Baltimore. So how to do that? Well, that's when you have to draw on all the skill sets from so many departments. So journalists got involved with people in industrial design and engineering to create sensors that were going to be put in people's homes to measure how hot it got over. Then people were actually going out and counting in neighborhoods and in blocks, and then also looking at satellite pictures to see what the tree canopy was. How many trees were there in a community, and how big were they? Were they tiny little trees that really weren't shading anything, or were they big and luxuriant trees? Then, of course, there was a need to talk to people about what their experiences were in the poorer, less tree-shaded communities versus the wealthier neighborhoods. When you're measuring effect, what are the ways to measure effect? Well, maybe you're going to look at health. How's the health of people being affected? Are they having to go to the emergency room for maybe things like respiratory distress, asthma, and so forth, things that heat makes worse? And so for this brilliant series called Code Red, they did all of those. So it was sort of classic, what you call shoe leather reporting, of talking to people on the street. You're out there, walking around in your shoes, not just once, but again and again and again. You're getting people's trust, and you're hearing what they have to say about their experience. But you're also mining these different sort of quantitative resources of hospital records and weather data and so forth. And then you're putting it all together into a story that people want to read and that can actually ultimately change policy, that can bring more trees into more parts of the city.